Welcome to the Hiscall Technology Podcast, where we are communicating tomorrow's business needs today. From just outside Nashville, Tennessee, join Hiscall as we discuss all things telephony, data, and infrastructure related to business leaders. Here we go.
What a day, what a day. This is Chuck back for another episode of the Hiscall Technology Podcast. We're going to be talking today about something that sometimes gets overlooked through the years. When a business relocates or expands into a new building, there must be a conversation about how we're going to connect systems and users. What types of cabling and how much cabling do we need to support everything that needs to communicate? Once the decision is made, the cabling plant is installed and often forgotten until something doesn't work or needs to be moved. On today's episode, we're going to be highlighting the infrastructure cabling of the technology systems that we often talk about, and we're going to look specifically at BICSI. Our guest today is Luffman, Director of Operations at Hiscall, and Joseph Hines, Operations Manager out of our Dixon office. Guys, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you for having us, Chuck.
Chuck, good to be with here.
I'm glad to have you. Lucas, tell us a little bit about your background at Hiscall, how long you've been here.
I've been here for 19 years. Started out as doing phone installs, cable installs, just anything that we had to do to get the job done. Later on in my career, I decided to go more of the infrastructure path. I become a level 2 installer and then work my way up to a technician. And 19 years later, I'm the Director of Operations and overseeing everything here at Hiscall that has to do with operations, warehouse, dispatch, anything after the sale. That's what Joe and I are responsible for.
You and Joseph have been working together for quite a while. Joseph, how long you been at Hiscall?
I've been at Hiscall for 15 years now. I've been in the industry since 1999. Started with a different company in Middle Tennessee, moved on from there, and came on to Hiscall 15 years ago and been here ever since.
From the time you started, Joseph, y'all worked pretty closely day to day, didn't you?
Correct, yep. There wasn't many techs when I started on. I think we had maybe 5 technicians, so we were kind of spread thin, so we all got to work together quite a bit.
And with you guys working together, the infrastructure department grew. Well, there was other people involved, of course, but it's grown into a big part of our business today.
Yeah, and when Joe started, and of course I started, we were doing, very small jobs. We would just mainly do copper, a little bit of fiber, and now it's grown from everything from access control to CCTV, audio visual, nurse call, outside plant. We've really grown a lot.
When we talk about infrastructure here at Hiscall, we aren't talking about more than cabling, but we're talking about, you said, access control, nurse call, CCTV,
audio visual,
overhead
paging. Yeah, there's we're in the middle of a big project today at a large hospital here in Middle Tennessee. Tell a little bit about that project and what the customer was wanting us to do, what the business we won there.
This is a newer style of paging system. It's an IP-based system between the equipment itself. Coming out of the amplifiers, it is still a 70-volt centralized paging system, so it goes out over 18-gauge wire to speakers and distributed in that kind of manner.
There's over 1,500 speakers on this install. It's a good size, multiple buildings throughout this campus.
And this hospital already had an existing paging system.
Correct.
Are we expanding the existing one? Or are we replacing it?
Rip and replace. We pulled everything, all the new cables Joe was mentioning, put all the new amps in. It'll be, going over their network now.
I opened up talking about cabling going in and not being thought about some of the cabling that goes to the speakers and probably been there for a long, long time.
Yep, definitely.
How many guys do we have in the infrastructure group?
Currently, we have, I believe, 6. And half of them have certifications for installing infrastructure. 2 of them will be going through certifications here directly.
That's exciting. We're going to get to that. I want to talk some more about that. Before we do, Lucas, you mentioned something I want to come back to as far as infrastructure, you mentioned outside plant. Describe, when you say outside plant, what you're talking about there.
Any type of fiber optics, copper, anything connecting buildings through outside plant, whether it's aerial, underground, whatever the means, you going outside.
Point to point over the air, using radios.
Yeah, I wanted to let's talk about that. Tell about that solution there and how it comes into play. It's really solved some problems for some customers over the years.
Point to point wireless. It is two radios that talk to each other across the air. Just say you have a building in a downtown area where you can't run aerial, you don't have enough room to run underground, so you connect a radio onto each building. You have to aim them to each other, and they talk back and forth across radio waves.
And there's multiple point-to-points, if you will. You have Light Point and other brands. Some are over radio, and then some are actually like a laser.
What's the distance limitations on some of those?
When I've had to talk to tech support, the first thing they say is, can you see the other radio with your naked eye? So they can go out of sight.
That's impressive.
And the technology has grown so much, even if the radios can't see each other, it still works. It's pretty impressive how far we've come.
It's exciting to see how the infrastructure department's growing and everything that they're doing. I wanted to talk specifically about something that we're heavily involved in, and that's BICSI. Tell me a little bit about what is BICSI first. Let's talk about that.
BICSI is an accreditation company that writes literature, creates exams, holds conferences, and different types of training for the ICT world. They produce those for people to go out and get technical knowledge in the field.
They set a standard for our industry.
And so the goal of BICSI is to make sure that the technicians that are out installing these solutions are following certain standards and
codes, and best practices. BICSI helps with different standards and codes and best practices, but there are other organizations that actually create standards and codes. So a code is something that is life critical. It has to be done. It's law. A standard is something that makes sure that the part you're putting in operates as it's supposed to. And best practices is kind of the combination of both of those on how to do it as best as possible in the real world.
And BICSI works with codes because obviously they have the last say, if you will. Mm-hmm. If you do BICSI standards, if you comply with their standards, there should be no reason you'll ever fail a fire inspection or whatever the local codes are having you do. They've done a lot of good things. Failing anymore it still happens because people either they don't know about BICSI or they don't practice what BICSI teaches. But the codes obviously, has the last say.
And one of the big things with BICSI also is interoperability. So if I install in Tennessee a Category 6 cable with jacks for a network connection for a computer, then I should be able to move to California and the same setup work in the same manner. And it's actually international. They work with international standards also, so it's really a global type deal.
Yeah, BICSI has memberships in over 100 countries. That's
wow.
Pretty impressive.
I did not know that.
And the purpose for also the interoperability was back in the days of divestiture when companies like AT&T tried to put their proprietary equipment out there that only AT&T could sell and work on. They were trying to break all that up so there would be more competition in the communication industries.
And so as a proponent of these standards and developing those things, they provide different levels of certification.
Correct.
And they provide the testing?
They work with other entities to come up with testing standards.
Okay.
So that is made by another entity. A TIA is what we use in America. TIA for our standards and the NEC for our codes.
Okay. What levels of certification does BICSI recognize or award, I suppose?
The installation ones are level 1, which is an entry level. You don't have to have any prior knowledge. You could come directly off the street, out of high school, and enter into this level. We'll teach you the fundamentals. Level 2 copper is the next step up from that. I believe you have to have 2 years of experience for that before you can ever even get into level 2 copper. And then after that, you can move into level 2 fiber. So they split up level 2. So level 2 copper is obviously just copper. Level 2 fiber is just fiber. And that leads you into the final, which is technician. So technician is the highest level installer. These 4 classes are set up in a step manner. So BICSI does expect for you to go, a lot like in college courses, to go to level 1 through level 2 copper, then fiber, to make it to technician. Because when you make it to technician, you're tested over all the levels.
There are some others. I mean, I know you've got some certifications beyond that.
Yes, there's design certifications, project management certifications that you can get through BICSI, but we offer the ability to train on the installer levels.
You say we. Hiscall is a certified BICSI training facility.
An authorized training facility.
Authorized training facility,
yep.
Okay.
I have the ability to set up a class at my will. I'm a certified trainer, so I can work with BICSI to set up a class whenever I have the people to do it. All of them are week-long classes with, at the end, you have a hands-on exam and a written exam.
You'll have several classes a year generally, I know it.
At the very minimum, I'll have 2 because I have to have 2 a year.
Okay.
But I've had up to, I believe, 6 a year.
Well, okay. I was thinking it seemed like recently you've had quite a few going on.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind to do 1 a month, really.
I'd like to see you doing 1 a month. It'd be kind of neat. How did we become involved with BICSI?
That was from a gentleman that I used to work with, Don Atwood Sr. So when he hired on at Hiscall, I believe right before I did, we moved into our new building, and he talked the owner into building a authorized training facility. So at that time, he was a certified trainer, and that's where Hiscall and BICSI kind of started their relationship.
So that was about 15 years ago or so.
Yeah,
I think it was.
We've been a member since 2004.
2004. Okay. Mm-hmm. When I'm choosing someone to do cabling work for me, build out my infrastructure, my outside plant, we talked about, it would be important to choose someone who was BICSI certified. I mean, anybody can show up with a box of cable and a ladder on their truck and say they can do the job, but how do we know, right?
And with BICSI, some of the things going back to the code standards and best practices, that's what really gets instilled into technicians so that they are correctly installing it per code and per standard, that it's going to work as it's supposed to.
What are some of the most common mistakes or errors that you'll see out in the field that someone who's not familiar with BICSI would do, you know?
Yeah, some of the things that I see is fire stopping. That's super, super important, especially in healthcare facilities. Not fire stopping properly it can be, dangerous. And, we see everything from cables being tie wrapped to ceiling grid. BICSI, as well as codes, requires all low voltage to have its own cable support and to be supported in a way that if it did catch fire, the support doesn't fault and then cables droop down. In other states, it hasn't been here in Tennessee yet, but in other states it's a code that even like paging speakers and other things are to be tied up so firemen don't get tangled up in any loose cables and get hurt. We see a lot of fill ratio issues where people just stuff the conduits full of cable, and it's you're supposed to only do a 40% fill. When we have to add other conduit, there's a reason behind it. It's not just to sell more sleeves or things like that. It has a purpose for it.
We just recently seen where somebody had ran an outdoor fiber across a field, and instead of boring under a driveway, they cut a slot in the top of the driveway and laid the fiber in it. So we were out there trying to get this fiber fixed and finally used an OTDR to run a trace over it and found it broke right where it was crossing there, where either a rock or the tire had rolled off the side of the driveway and broke the fiber.
Another issue we see, and it hurts us when we bid jobs, is we bid, things to do 90 degrees and stay in corridors and things. So after the business is up and running, you're not interrupting people in offices, etc. And, it's just straight shot it, or the saying, as a crow flies. A lot of other trades will run it as a crow flies, and yeah, you save a little bit, but then, you look in the ceiling, it looks like a big spider web.
What are you talking about with the corridors and 90 angles and that kind of thing?
Well, when we design a job, we want to make sure that wherever our pathway is accessible in the future, and we have to disturb people, I guess, as least as we have to when we're adding cables or running new cables in other parts of the building. Some want to run it down the closest, maybe on a new install, it's as close as you can and less cable, but adding it, you're disturbing, multiple people. Mm-hmm. And the best thing, is to stay in an open area where you're not disturbing people. You're making nice 90 degrees.
One of the sections in BICSI is pathways and spaces. That's a big section between all the different levels. And that deals with what Lucas is talking about, how to properly lay out a pathway. So a pathway could be a J-hook style hook that holds your cable up. It could be conduit. It could be ladder rack, cable tray. And then your spaces, which will be your equipment rooms, your telecommunication rooms, your entrance facilities, and things of that nature.
Lucas mentioned a fill ratio of 40%. Is there also some recommendation for J-hooks?
Yes, the fill ratios where they come in, there's two parts of it. So if you're going through a fire-rated wall, you want your fill ratio to be where you have enough material in there to seal that hole if there was a fire and the cables burned away. The other thing is, if you have too many cables in a conduit or confined space, they'll actually pinch across each other and you'll start getting alien crosstalk. So you'll get cables talking across other cables,
right,
which cause packet loss, which cause computer issues and data transfer issues. That's part of the J-hooks, that if you start filling them too tight and too full, that you run into that issue, that you get so much copper on top of itself that the ones at the bottom are getting smushed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so all the cable support has a fill ratio.
I got you.
For that reason.
Very interesting. Very interesting. If I'm a company and I've received some bids, and I start comparing my bids, and I've got one that's 3-4 times higher than the others, I might want to investigate, rather than just assuming they're charging way too much. Might investigate, well, why are they so much? It may be because they've got additional cable to follow and supports and pathways to build out, where the other company might be planning straight shots and using less cable, and maybe they don't have fire stop included in theirs and that kind of thing. That would all add to cost, I suppose, right?
Absolutely. We see it every day.
And one thing that would be easy for a customer to do is to put in their bid that they are requiring a certain number of BICSI registered technicians to be on the crew. That's what a lot of companies do. They go ahead and try to get everybody at the same playing field.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense. I know we've sent a lot of people through BICSI training. I've not been through one yet, Joseph, though, but just put that on your calendar.
I would say a good 80% of who we have either is or is directly will be taking a level of BICSI.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we send every technician, and in the future we're sending all our engineers through it as well, because it helps us not having to send, on the system side, for instance, we're not having to send multiple techs to troubleshoot cable. So
right.
It teaches troubleshooting skills and other things. So going forward, we will be sending everyone through one level or another.
Exciting. Well, guys, we're reaching the end of our time here today. Any final thoughts or words that you want to add? Something I didn't ask?
Hiscall is a authorized training facility, and I am a certified trainer, so Right now, we're the only ones in Tennessee, and we do train customers. We do train competition, if you will, and we train all of our internal staff as needed. So if you go to BICSI's website, you can look up ATFs and find Hiscall and reach us that way, or go to our website, hiscall.com, to look up BICSI for BICSI classes.
Very good. Thank you for that, Joseph.
And the good thing about BICSI is they just don't, teach you the standards or the proper way to do things, but it's also, they have a standard of ethics, and that's, how a technician should conduct business and handle himself on jobs. So BICSI really focuses on, it's a whole, the whole technician from ground up, from troubleshooting to installs to how you carry yourself. They really focus on that and do a good job.
Then once you come out of the field, you can go on towards design and project management. So your education doesn't have to end there. There's a lot of opportunities, and I believe it to be equivalent to certain college degrees once you go through it, and I believe it's a very good thing.
And once you become, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, level 1 does not, you cannot be
it doesn't renew. You do have to. That's a good point. So level 1 does not renew, but once you get to level 2 and hopefully to your technician, they do renew. There is a fee to renew, and there are credits you have to get through that time period to show you're continuing your education. So you have to submit that to be able to renew your certification.
And the good thing with BICSI also is they represent not only your copper installations and your fiber installations, but audio visual, CCTV, access control. They're really incorporating everything in our low voltage industry. It's really helping a lot to keep everybody on the same playing field. You keep the standards up. They're doing a great job.
I hope this information's been helpful to you, and you'll look for BICSI certifications when you need cabling work done. You'll ask for that and expect to see it. Lucas, Joseph, thanks for being here today.
Hey, thank you for having us. It's been fun.
Thank you, Chuck.
I want to thank everybody that's listening. I appreciate you taking the time to spend it here with us, and it would mean a lot to me if you would give us a rating, write us a positive review out on your favorite podcast app. It helps other people find the podcast. I'll leave you with these encouraging words. Don't be afraid, only believe.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to the Hiscall Technology Podcast. Subscribe to this podcast so you can stay up to date with today's business communication trends. To learn more about Hiscall solutions for your business needs or to listen to previous podcasts, visit us at our website, hiscall.com.